Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Richard Clark. I'm a hypnotherapist and I've been a holistic therapist for over 14 years. For Throwback Thursday, I'm talking about my favourite films, favourite albums and favourite TV series. Today I'm talking on the same of the film series, and I'm going to talk about this film called Modern Times. This film was written and created and came out in 1936, and it's an American partake social comedy film written and directed by Charlie Chaplin. And it's in which he's a little iconic character. Little Tramp was his last performance as the character. And he struggles to survive in the modern industrialised world, hence the word modern times. Modern times, basically the whole plot of this is the tramp works on an assembly line where he suffers greatly due to the stress and pace of the repetitive work. He eventually suffers a nervous breakdown and runs amok, getting stuck within the machinery and throwing the factory into chaos. He's then sent to the hospital. Following his recovery, the now unemployed tramp is mistakenly arrested in a communist demonstration. Obviously, he was doing this because Charlie Chaplin was accused of being a communist because he didn't like the way the authoritarian US government were trying to tell people how to act. And in 1936, he was seeing what was happening in Germany, Nazi Germany, and was against it. And in fact, there's a lot of this in the culture about how the film studios were taken over by Jewish people and how they became kind of authoritarian, though they were escaping that from Germany. It's kind of a weird situation. Anyway, so Chaplin escapes this demonstration, and in jail he accidentally ingests smuggled cocaine, and in his subsequent delirium he avoids being put back in his cell. When he returns, he stumbles upon a jailbreak and knocks the convicts unconscious, for which he is hailed as a hero and given special treatment. I mean, remember, this is a comedy, so it's very surreal, but it's just the idea of what it's going against. When he's informed that he'll soon be released due to his heroic actions, he argues unsuccessfully, and then that he prefers life in jail, because if he's in jail, he's being fed. He's not unemployed. He doesn't want to go back to working in a factory because it's so mundane. So this is about the culture of, like, sometimes this is where some people actually ended up being in jail was probably better than being in the real world struggling. Upon release of him being in jail, he applies for a new job with a shipbuilder, but leaves after causing an accident. Soon after, he runs into an orphan girl, Ellen, who is fleeing the police after stealing a loaf of bread. Now, in the 30s, this was quite common because with the Great Depression. So Chaplin's films in the Great Depression was against the idea of the poverty, and he was showcasing that. And the amusement and comedy of people going against the police and so forth was an escape for people. That's what films are. They're an escape from the reality of life, but also they can have a social conscious message within them. Determined to go back to jail and save her from arrest, the tramp tells the police that he is the thief and asks to be arrested. But a witness reveals his deception and he is freed. He then eats an enormous amount of food at a cafeteria without paying to get arrested, and once again encounters Ellen in a paddy wagon after he is put in it. Paddy wagon is actually the word for, it's to do with the police, but it's also it's a racist connotation, because the paddy wagon was also to do with paddy meaning Irish, so because the Irish were considered to be criminals, so the idea of the paddy wagon was actually the Irish would be put in there to go to jail. It's a racist term, but at that time that was what they were called. Anyway, he's put in the wagon, and it soon crashes, however, and she convinces him to escape with her. The tramp then gets a job as a night watchman at a department store and encounters 3 burglars led by a guy called Big Bill, a fellow worker from the factory he used to work at. He explains that they are hungry and desperate. After sharing drinks with them, he wakes up the next morning during opening hours and is arrested once again for failing to call the police on the burglars, and for sleeping in the store's clothes on a desk, shocking a customer and the storekeeper. Days later, Ellen takes him to a rundown shack to live in. The next morning, he reads about an old factory's reopening and lands a job as a mechanic's assistant. The other workers then suddenly decide to go on strike and tell the tramp to leave with them. Outside the factory, he accidentally launches a brick at a policeman and is arrested again. He's released 2 weeks later and learns that Ellen is now a cafe dancer. She gets him a job as a singer and waiter, but he goes about his duties in a clumsy way. During his floor show, he loses his cuff, which bears the lyrics to his song, but he rescues the act by improvising the lyrics using gibberish and by pantomiming. When police arrive to arrest Ellen for her early escape, the two are forced to flee again. Then Ellen despairs that their struggles are all pointless, but the tramp reassures her, and as a bright dawn, they walk down the road towards an uncertain but hopeful future. Now, with this idea of modern times, is what we've got to understand is the reason it's written and why it's such a good film is because it's all silent. There's no spoken word. So the idea is the set design, the set pieces, and it's all against, and because this is where a film can have a universal language, because even if you cannot speak English as a language, because these are silent films, it's the image what takes you there. And a lot of people will say, oh, Charlie Chaplin's The Kid's a good film, Great Dictator, Limelight, whatever, but The Modern Times is probably the most poignant film because it's the last film he plays as the tramp, because he obviously wanted to do something different. He'd had enough of that role. But also it's his actual showing against the authority of the world and how he felt as the underdog. So within that, then the next film he really pretty much did was The Great Dictator in 1939, which was where he mimicked Hitler. So Chaplin, in the movie business, was the first person to own his own studios, write, direct, act, everything. He was very independent. And he had a lot of issues in America. They didn't like he had that independence. He wasn't controlled by the studios because he could control his own thing. So Chaplin's films always had that, and I think this is something very important in films and the movie business, that sometimes you have to take risks, and the risk-taking part is elemental for Chaplin's ideals. Yes, Chaplin's films are now, 80, nearly 90 years old, some of them. In fact, 1936, we're looking at, what now? So in like 10, 12 years, it'll be 100 years old, this film. But the importance of this as film, of the risk, of taking risks, of doing something which is creating a social political messages, but being entertaining. And that's why Modern Times is, I think it's such an important film. And if you don't watch anything about Chaplin, if you've never watched a Chaplin film, please watch this film, because I think it's so poignant. And it really teaches you a lot about what he was, as a filmmaker, what he wanted to do. And the other film I'm going to talk about is later on in the series is a film called Chaplin, which is about a biography about his life. And that explains more about him. But Modern Times is the film which really we should regard in high esteem because of what he's talking about.